Oh man, it is hot in here. It's 102 degrees. I'm in my shop right now where I just finished building EX ARCA. EX ARCA is more or less Latin for out of the box. Sapphire sent me their brand new 5600 XT GPU, and I wanted to put this in a mini, but the card is just a little bit too long. Well, I did ask if I could modify it to fit. Well, they said I should probably think outside the box instead, so I took that kind of literally here. So what do I call this kind of project? It's not really a scratch build because it uses my chassis, the Skyreach 4 Mini Classic. But it's not really a mod because every single part required so much work and handcrafting. Now, whether it's a mod or a scratch build, or whether you love it or you hate it, it does at least accomplish what I set out to do with all my builds, and that is to be something that's unique. EX ARCA is composed of 4 key components. First is the chassis itself, which is based on the Skyreach 4 Mini Classic. Second is the front bezel. Thirdly is the wooden pedestal. And fourthly is the integration of the wires from the power supply on the outside to the components on the inside. All of the front pedals is a tiny laser cut part and need to be bent, which meant that I had to actually make a bender from scratch to get that nice clean curve that I wanted. This was necessary because I couldn't just willy-nilly fold the part. The bend had to be precise because there were holes in the front of the chassis that it needed to line up with, and there were holes on the side of the chassis where the power supply cables need to run through. With the bender, I was able to get a nice bend, and everything was able to be installed and lined up perfectly. As for the chassis, of course there's a lot of work that goes into actually making one of these, but for the modifications, I first powder coated it, and then I had to drill in new holes all over the frame so I could bolt the other parts and pieces to it. I also had to do a liberal amount of sanding and filing in order to make some of the pieces and components actually fit, because the Radeon Pulse is just a little bit too wide to fit through that front cutout. The seemingly most simple or understated part of the whole chassis is the wooden pedestal, but it's deceiving because the most work and time went into it. I start with the thick walnut plank. I designed a program to CNC out my basic shape. I filled the knots on the cut portion before removing it from the overall base for strength, and then proceeded to do a lot of chiseling, sanding, filing, polishing, you name it. The finish, I tried something new. I have a friend who makes fancy custom knives, and he uses super glue, and I decided to give that a shot. And besides from burning my eyes out and taking a long time to sand down, it really produced a beautiful finish that I really like. The wooden base has a trick to it. It has a recess milled in it to route some wires. There are also recessed holes for a pressed-in 3D printed part, which I printed out of onyx, which is a mix between nylon and chopped carbon fiber, and holds the DC input jack. Now, the final major component of EX ARCA is the wiring. The power supply is situated on the outside, the front of the chassis, so the wiring had to be interesting and fold and tuck and tie everything together. So one at a time, I had to feed the wires from the 24-pin connector output to the input on the motherboard, which was kind of a pain. To make it all look nice and neat, I made some cable clips, my own cable clips, and threaded everything together. It took a little bit of time, it was a little bit tedious, but I think the result was worth it. Although I will say that, given more time, I'd like to work on this some more, but I don't have more time, so here's where I'm at. Now, of course, there's tons of little tiny details as well. There is a 180-degree PCB connector for the graphics card, which I think cleans up the look. I put little tiny heat sinks on the SSD to kind of blend it more into the motherboard. The rear I/O shield is actually sanded, stripped, and painted. And of course the front on-off switch, which is hand-built, and I dyed the cables black using vinyl dye. Now, if you want to watch the full raw video of me making this computer case from start to finish, you can go to my Patreon page. I also have the 3D files, the CAD work for this case, for my other projects, and lots of other stuff there, so check it out. So concludes the overview for Season 4, Episode 2 of Not From Concentrate. a series where I take a Sapphire GPU and I build a custom mod around it. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you again, Sapphire, for sponsoring this build. And I'm going to go inside where it's air conditioned, like a sane person. Peace.